I was living in a small apartment, a tight, 2-floor setup with a second bedroom and a small office upstairs. The main floor belonged to my best friend and his ex. Their room sat just beside the staircase, which led down into the so-called living room. Someone once told us there was something off about that space, like it held on to things that didn't belong. One night, it was just me and the ex at home. We were both upstairs, tucked away in our rooms. I was deep into a gaming session when, sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight, I heard something strange. It sounded like a TV show, muffled, but clear enough to pick up bits of dialogue. At first, I thought she was watching something downstairs, but something felt off. The sound seemed to bleed through the walls unnaturally, like it wasn't in the apartment at all. I paused my game, opened my door, and stepped into the hallway to listen. Silence. It's utter pitch-black silence. I looked down the stairs and saw her, frozen, pale, eyes locked on the empty living room. I called out, asking what she was watching. Her face drained even further. She said she had just opened her door too, trying to hear the same thing. But when she did, the sound vanished. The lights she thought she saw flickering from a screen had disappeared, and what remained was only blackness. We were shaken, really shaken. A few days later, we found a crawl space tucked away behind a panel near the stairs. Inside were dozens of empty whippets. Later, someone sensitive to the paranormal told us it was likely a portal, some kind of spiritual window. I don't know what I believe, but I still can't explain what we both experienced that night. And I never quite trusted the silence in that apartment again. I worked the night shift at a nursing home for years, and strange stories about the top floor were a constant. Staff whispered about footsteps, shadows, and odd noises, but I never believed any of it. I always volunteered for the night checks, especially on that floor, figured someone had to be rational. One night, while helping a colleague change a resident, he paused and said he heard footsteps out in the corridor. I brushed it off as old pipes or someone on another floor. A few minutes later, I went alone to the cupboard at the end of the hallway to grab some fresh bed sheets. The corridor was long and dimly lit, humming with that sterile, unnatural silence you only get in places where people wait to die. As I walked back, sheets in hand, I began hearing it too. Soft, dragging footsteps. Then the unmistakable crinkle of plastic, like someone rummaging through bags. I rolled my eyes, thinking it was someone messing around, but there was this growing tightness in my chest, like something wasn't right. Annoyed, I leaned out of the room to look. That's when I saw it. A massive shadow glided past the hallway, human-shaped, too large to be just a trick of the light. It moved in sync with the sounds, slow and deliberate. I froze, completely. I couldn't breathe. My body locked up as if I were watching something I wasn't supposed to see. I had to call another staff member to come upstairs. I physically couldn't leave the room on my own. I'd never seen anything in all my years of working there, and I don't believe in ghosts. But from that night on, I refused to do night checks alone on that floor. I never saw it again, but the fear never left. Back in college, I lived in a crumbling, half-rotted house at the end of a forgotten dirt road. No neighbors, no streetlights, just us and the shadow of a cemetery down the hill. The place felt wrong from the moment we moved in. It wasn't just old, it breathed, creaked, and watched. The kind of house that groaned at night even when the wind was still. One night my girlfriend stayed over. I was dead asleep, but she lay wide awake, paralyzed by unease. Around 3 a.m., she heard slow, deliberate footsteps creeping up the basement stairs. Each step thudded softly, closer, heavier, until they stopped right at the door. Silence followed. She waited for the knob to turn. It never did. The steps never retreated. Just stopped. She lay in bed, frozen, waiting for something to burst through. But nothing happened. When I woke up, she was pale and jumpy, whispering about the footsteps she was sure she didn't imagine. Another time, a group of us were lounging in the living room when the front door slammed open with a violent bang. It echoed through the entire house. I leapt up and ran into the front hallway, expecting someone breaking in. But the door was shut. Not just shut, bolted. The lock hadn't been touched. No one was outside. Just that same empty road and the endless stretch of graves down the hill. The scariest moment came when my friend was in bed with his girlfriend. He woke up to a scream, a shrill, blood-curdling scream of a woman, right next to his ear. He said it was like someone had leaned in and screamed straight into his soul, but no one else heard it. No one else was awake. The room was empty, but for the two of them. That house was more than just creepy. It was cursed. We joked about ghosts at first, but the laughter faded fast. The house felt alive in the worst way, like it wanted us there, like it was feeding off us. To this day, it's the only place I've lived where I truly feared the dark. My mum and I moved into a house where an old woman, whose husband had died the year before, had gotten to the point of needing to move into a home. They had been in that home their whole marriage. My mum bought the house from her daughter. I didn't think anything of it. The decor was obviously very, very dated. It was a time warp inside. A pool room with a bar and fireplace, wood paneling, and a dartboard. Really cool. It was in the basement next to my room, which had been a workshop of the husband's. Part of the workshop was still intact outside of my bedroom door. Anyhow, we had been there for 3 months, and one morning I saw an old man at my doorway, a literal ghost, like see-through. I was half awake. He walked in my room, looked at me. I felt a feeling of non-threateningness, and he left. I went back to sleep. I wake up at my alarm, and my door's open. My door is never open when I sleep, and my mum never came downstairs or opened my door. We didn't get along, and she ignored me mostly. That morning, I walked upstairs, and my mum said, "The old guy in the basement left last night." I stopped short and asked her, did she see him too? She said, "Yeah. He took his hat and jacket and came in her room and then left." She is spiritual, so she was totally nonchalant, but I was freaked the fuck out since I was an atheist. Anyhow, the details of his looks, actions, and vibe were all the same. When I was 9 years old, I was biking home in the evening. We lived in the countryside up a small mountain. The road from the village was an uphill, a flat section, and then another uphill. The road lights only stretched to the end of the flat section. I was a bit afraid of the dark, so I stopped at the end of the road lights, just at the bottom of the last uphill to gather courage to bike the last section home. It was a partial moon, so it wasn't pitch black, and at the end of the uphill, I saw a figure walking down towards me. I thought I'd wait until she got closer, as I would feel less afraid to bike in the dark if there was someone else close. But about halfway down the hill, the person walked into a thin shadow of a tree on the road and never came back out. Just disappeared. I stood there for a while trying to figure out what I just saw, and then panicked and biked down to the village and stayed there until my parents came driving and wondered why I never came home. They tried to explain it with stuff like the person might have gone into the woods or something. What they didn't disclose though, out of fear that I'd never dare to bike home again, was that my father had seen the same thing walking home from work. He had seen her clear as day, walking down the hill for a while. When he looked down for just a second and looked up, she was gone, and there were no footsteps in the fresh snow. I later read a book about local legends, and apparently a lot of people during at least a century have seen her walking down the hill and disappearing halfway down. My youngest daughter loved this story, so we've been on ghost stakeouts, where we buy pizzas and snacks and hang out at the bottom of the hill, listening to the Ghostbusters theme song and trying to see the ghost. At one of my previous sysadmin jobs, we were closing down one of our smaller data centers as it was being consolidated into one of our larger ones. But we still had to have at least one person there in case of server issues that had to be dealt with on site. We rotated each week on which one of us would do the overnights there. The place was reportedly haunted by what I have no idea. I just heard rumors from other co-workers when I hired in. So imagine a relatively large open office space that is completely void of all the cubicles, desks, etc. that are normally there, with just one desk and a few random cables hanging from the ceiling. Also, just the lights over my desk were working and bleeding out into my surroundings by about 3 feet. That was where I was for the week. I remember sitting there and just hearing ambient noise from the sort of far-off server room, fans, cooling system, etc., working on a server for a customer of ours, and seeing something dart across the room in my peripheral vision. I looked up and didn't see anything, so I figured my eyes were just tired from the screen light and making me see those floaties when your eyes close too tightly. I went back to work, and then about 5 minutes later I saw it again, although this time I heard the bathroom door open and shut. A big, heavy door you pulled open, and the mechanism at the top of the door pulled it shut. I thought maybe one of my co-workers was here for a server fix, so I got up and went to greet them and wait for them. About 10 minutes pass, and no one comes out of the bathroom. I go in to make sure they're not passed out or hurt. One of my co-workers suffered from seizures. But lo and behold, empty bathroom. Now I'm creeped out, leave the bathroom, and this time, see the shadow person thing on the other side of the room dart across again, but look at it straight on and not from my peripheral vision. I quickly went over and threw the rest of the lights on and started searching the whole office and server room for a co-worker, as I was 100% sure they were fucking with me. Never found anyone. The rest of the night was uneventful, as well as the rest of the week, minus me basically shitting bricks sitting at my desk waiting for something else to happen. It was around 2 a.m., that dead part of the night when even silence feels like it's watching you. I was wide awake in my bunk on a cruise ship, the room swaying gently with the ocean. My friend, who I was sharing the cabin with, had passed out drunk hours earlier, snoring so loud it sounded like something was being dragged across the floor. Normally, he waited until I fell asleep first because of the noise, but not that night. That night, I was left with just the stifling quiet, the metallic groan of the ship, and the dim glow of my reading light. I was trying to lose myself in a book when I felt it. A pressure in the air, subtle at first, then heavy, like the atmosphere itself had thickened. I didn't hear anything, didn't see movement, but I knew something was at the foot of the bed. My stomach dropped, the kind of fear that isn't loud or panicked, but cold and paralyzing. I lifted my eyes from the page, heart thudding in my throat. There it was, a figure, roughly human-shaped but wrong. Its entire body was grey and shifting, as if made of smoke and TV static. No defined face, just a blur, a smear of features that never quite settled. It stood there, unmoving, just watching me, head tilted slightly, curious, like a child seeing something unfamiliar. I couldn't move, couldn't call out. I didn't even feel threatened, just watched. In my mind, I asked, "What do you want?" The moment I did, it turned. No footsteps, no sound. It drifted slowly toward the cabin door, each step unraveling its form, until it faded completely into nothing. The room felt normal again. My friend never stirred. I just lay there, wide-eyed, knowing with every fiber of my being, I hadn't imagined it. So in college, I studied in the UK. I lived in a house with a group of other American students that had stories of the ghost of a girl who passed away while living there. I never believed in any of it, but it was fun to play along. The kitchen had one way in and out, and right after you entered the kitchen, to your right was a padlocked door to the cellar where she allegedly lived. I had the only key. We were all a little homesick near Thanksgiving, so we decided to do a meal together. This required some creative cooking schedules due to small appliances in the kitchen, so one girl who didn't have class the next day offered to stay up late to get the turkey going. We went into the cellar the first and only time that evening to get larger cooking implements. At 2:04 in the morning, I wake up to my door rattling, like someone was pushing against it. I assumed it was a housemate who just went to the wrong door. About 30 seconds later, I hear a scratchy female voice softly saying, "Hello," every 5 seconds or so. My window was open, and it sounded like it was coming from outside, so I got up to close my window, as I assumed it was some drunk girl walking back from the pub. I get to the window, and there's no one there, and then I hear, "Hello?" Clear as a bell behind me, my door rattles again and goes silent. I've had night terrors before and hallucinate when I have even a mild fever, so I assume I'm still asleep and lay back down. The next morning at 7 a.m, the girl who's cooking tells me, I had the creepiest night. At 1:50, I heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. Then the door rattled. Then at 2:10, the door rattled again, and I heard footsteps coming down. She told me this before I had said anything to anyone about what I'd experienced. I lived in a house with a girl in the room next to mine. The roommates weren't close at all and had weird schedules, so on weekends I was usually alone, except for random occasions when the girl would be home from her boyfriends. I used to live in my car and had many very dangerous living situations, flop houses with criminals, drug dealers, and, unfortunately, even a murderer. I didn't know that until after he was arrested. So this place felt like a warm, safe place to get my life together and finish my degree while I work. Been there 2 years at this point. One Saturday night, home alone like usual, at about 9:30 p.m, as I'm sitting watching TV, I get this feeling like I'm being watched. I've only been home for an hour, maybe 2 at this point. I try to ignore it, but I can't. I am not easily scared. I cannot ignore it. I can't explain it. I got up, checked all the doors were locked, and closed the blinds. Sit back down, try to watch The Daily Show and Colbert, but I cannot get the itch of fear out of me. Eventually, I start not being able to ignore it. It's taking over my body. I can't breathe right, and I'm literally scared. This is going to sound insane, but I shit you not, my inner monologue was worried I'd get stabbed. Specifically, I kept the lights on and went upstairs. It's behind 2 doors that lock since I was in the attic. My door locks, and the door to the stairs to the attic locks. I never close it, but I closed and locked it. I went to my room and locked it, and hid under my covers, staring in the dark at my door with the very intense fear of being stabbed. I forced myself to just lie there until I fell asleep. I fell asleep terrified, but slept hard. The next day, like 7 to 8 a.m, I hear the door to the attic unlock, and it wakes me up because WTF. I get up, and the fear is totally gone. I feel like me again. I head to see who opened the door, and I see that someone is in the kitchen. I go downstairs and see it's the girl who lives in the other attic room. I say, "Hey, I didn't know you were home last night." She is messing around with kitchen morning things and says, "Yeah, I needed to study, but I couldn't. I got home and had dinner, studied for a few hours, and then I had to go to sleep. I felt like someone was going to come and get me, to stab me or something." I was scared again, but different, like it confirmed for me someone else felt the fear. It was real. We talked about it, and since she was religious, she thought it was a nefarious person or spirit, but she also seemed upset by it. She thanked me for locking the door, but said she was going to stay with her BF for a while because she just can't shake how creepy it was. We literally felt the same thing, being watched, hunted, by someone who wanted to stab us. It was visceral and primal fear we felt. And then poof, gone the next day as fast as it came on. The lights were still on downstairs too. She didn't want to talk about it again after that and moved out shortly afterwards, as did I. But 2 situations the other people confirmed.